If I told you your life is controlled by one single company, they are the reason behind what you see, what you eat, and even what you buy. They control most of the biggest media companies and assets in the world. Due to their huge wealth and investment, they hold the world hostage, pulling strings all over, driving profit for themselves. For example, the company spent over $10 million on European Union lobbying for $2.8 trillion worth of pension funds. Let me say that is even small. It holds the largest investment in coal and fossil fuel industry, one of the biggest contributors to global warming. But if I also told you we are the main contributor to all these activities, would you believe it? Just wait and see. The company is so rich that they hold more assets than the GDP of every country except two. The company is BlackRock.
BlackRock looks set to clinch a deal to buy Barclays Global Investors.
BlackRock is the world's largest asset manager with $10 trillion in assets. But that is just the tip of the iceberg. BlackRock is the #1 manager of all pension funds across the world, which shows that we are the sole cause of all these problems. But even if you try your absolute best, I guess you can't even do anything about it. Hear me out. That isn't the only way your money finds its way to them. Your insurance company also invests with them. BlackRock is the top shareholder of the 5 largest banks in the United States. But the secret is they own part in every big bank in the United States. If BlackRock doesn't own part in your bank, then Vanguard and State Street are the shareholder of the bank. BlackRock is the biggest shareholder in those institutions. In total, they control more than $21 trillion of assets, close to the entire US GDP. This shows how big the company is. If I ask you, do you like Coca-Cola? What about Pepsi? Okay, then you need to hear this. BlackRock holds shares in both Coca-Cola and Pepsi. This makes them define how the game is played in the drink industry. If you thought Coca-Cola and Pepsi are rivals, then you better change your mind. They are just in for your money. There's this thing called secular ownership. To explain it, let's say company AB owns a shares in company B. At the same time, company B also owns shares in company AB. That is the relationship between BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard. When it comes to food, they got you covered. They are the #1 shareholder of Nestle group of companies in Europe. In America, I'm sorry to say, your country is already so. In the Middle East, BlackRock is in talks with the Saudi Crown Prince to pump about $15.5 billion into a new gas pipeline infrastructure. The sole aim is to drive profit for the company and reduce prices of crude oil, as they say. What about Australia, Africa, and South America? This is where things get crazier. BlackRock owns shares in almost every big public traded company in the world. For example, Apple, Tesla, Pfizer, Amazon, Walmart, and to name a few. If you thought you are safe because you don't live in America, then you still haven't grasped how big the company is. BlackRock is also the sole shareholder and owner of shares in the 4 largest Australian banks. The company has hands on everything. For example, in Germany, they own shares in the German postal system, the Commerzbank, and Deutsche Bank. In United Kingdom, they own shares in Lloyds Bank, and nearly every country in Europe has BlackRock stocks ownership in at least one bank or financial institution. In Africa, BlackRock is also the largest institutional lender to countries and companies in the world. Outside the financial sector, BlackRock is a shareholder of 172 public traded companies in France and over 17,000 companies across the world. At each meeting, it has never failed to vote. BlackRock is the largest institutional investor in the ammunition industry as of 2022, holding $597 million worth of shares. When it comes to the media space, they own shares directly or indirectly in companies like CNN, CNBC, and Fox News, just to name a few. But the most surprising thing is that among the top 2 financial institutions in the world, BlackRock owns shares in them, which are Vanguard and State Street. The secret is, these same companies are heavy investors in ammunition industry. Do you remember these names? Goldman Sachs, AIG, and JP Morgan. These companies were a major player in the 2008 financial crisis. One way or the other, BlackRock owns shares in them. But the question is, who created this behemoth? BlackRock was founded in 1988 by Larry Fink. The idea came when he lost $100 million at his first job as head of securitization in First Boston. That experience was his motivation that developed into what he and his partners considered to be excellent risk management and fiduciary practice. Larry Fink sought funding from Petty Peterson of Blackstone, who got hooked in Larry's vision, and immediately he gave Fink and his team $5 million credit line under BlackRock Financial Management in exchange for a 50% stake in the bond business. Within months, the business has turned profitable, and by 1989, the group asset has quadrupled to $2.7 billion. 1994, BlackRock was managing $53 billion of assets. BlackRock went public in 1999 at $14 a share on the New York Stock Exchange. By the end of 1999, BlackRock was managing $163 billion in assets. BlackRock grew both organically and by acquisition. In August 2004, BlackRock made its first major acquisition. It bought the State Street Research for $375 million in cash and $50 million in stock, making BlackRock one of the biggest asset managers in the world. That amount is not near the behemoth BlackRock has become today.
This is an extraordinary period for America's economy. Over the past few weeks, many Americans have felt anxiety about their finances and their future. I understand their worry and their frustration. We've seen triple-digit swings in the stock market. Major financial institutions have teetered on the edge of collapse, and some have failed. As uncertainty has grown, many banks have restricted lending. Credit markets have frozen, and families and businesses have found it harder to borrow money. We are in the midst of a serious financial crisis, and the federal government is responding with decisive action.
During the 2008 financial meltdown, who did the Fed call up to clean up the mess? BlackRock. BlackRock was tasked to analyze over $500 billion worth of toxic assets from Citigroup, Freddie Mac, and AIG. The company received $200 million as fee. BlackRock was awarded this contract with no competitive bidding in a process enveloped in secrecy. Even though BlackRock was one of the biggest shareholders in the same institution they were helping to bail out. Fast forward to 2020.
Rick, quick question for you, sir. We're just getting word from the Federal Reserve, and this might be boosting the markets even more this afternoon.
The Fed making history today, and for the first time ever, began buying corporate debt ETFs. The unprecedented move driving an explosion in the corporate debt market, $910 billion.
When the federal government was injecting capitals into companies who were highly indebted to withstand the shocks of the pandemic, who did the federal government pay $8 million to help them inject the capital? BlackRock. BlackRock was hired to help the central government to buy non-toxic assets and inject capital into Wall Street companies by buying corporate bonds. These same companies, BlackRock was a major shareholder. All this was done because of one single tool that the company possesses, called Aladdin.
BlackRock causing a bit of a stir in the financial world recently, announcing it will lay off about 40 employees and instead use data mining tools to help select stocks.
Aladdin is a risk management system, a software tool that tracks and analyzes trading, monitors a whopping $200 trillion in assets for over 200 financial firms, and even the Federal Reserve and European central banks use it. Aladdin executes trades in every asset class across every industry. It controls over half of all ETFs, 17% of the bond market, 10% of the stock market, and manages almost all pension funds in US. The success of Aladdin was stopping the world from experiencing complete financial collapse in 2008, which has helped BlackRock to earn a prestigious place among the world's governing bodies. In 2017, Fink launched a new project at BlackRock called Monarchy, which replaced many of the firm's fund managers with algorithms. Now, over 70% of all US stock market trades are executed by robots. The influence of BlackRock and its all-powerful algorithm cannot be overstated, but the success of the company didn't come without stepping on people's toes. As of 2021, at least 3 executives from BlackRock operate notable positions in President Joe Biden's cabinet, and before that, the Secretary of New York Federal Reserve was a close friend of Larry. BlackRock forges close relationships with government to outpace competitors, attracting special benefits and avoiding numerous regulatory standards. Since 2004, researchers note BlackRock has hired at least 84 former government officials, regulators, and central bankers worldwide. This has quickly bled into conflict of interest and corruption. It's just allegation. In recent times, people have been protesting in front of BlackRock's New York headquarters, dumping lumps of coal inside the office building and chanting "Stop funding climate debt" and "Climate justice now." The firm recently pushed back against the parliamentary committee in the UK refusing to halt investment in coal, oil and gas. According to Fox Business, the asset manager said its role was not to engineer a specific decarbonization outcome in the real economy. In response to the UK request, demonstrators took to the street to protest BlackRock's decision, ending in 10 arrests. At this point, I will leave it to you. Leave your comments below. Peace.